Is one veteran NFC North receiver about to have a big week 3? When is the right time to give up on a potential breakout in the NFC South? And can one rookie duplicate his week 2 success for another huge Sunday? Plus, a 4-time winner in the FFPC and the Footballguys Players Championship and the Week 1 4th-place team in the 2021 FFPC main event, Jason Tavares, will drop by to talk about KJ Osborne, Cordell Patterson, Cortland Sutton, and much, much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com, with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here's Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Greetings and salutations, all of you Balkaholics and Farrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. That intro music provided by the Quiet Hollers. Remember to check out their music at QuietHollers.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football of the KFFSC. It is Farrell Elliott. Farrell, how are we doing tonight? This is our last show in September for 2021. The season's zooming by, man.
It is, Balky. We're already in week 3, and I am joining you from the road tonight. I just where 65 and 70 intersect in downtown Indianapolis, and I'm headed home. And if I'm too noisy or if you can't make out what I'm saying, let me know, and I will pull off the side of the road, safety first. I've slowed down. I'm only doing 85 now. And, we're ready to talk some football, so it's a good thing.
So you're coming through from by way of Indianapolis to Louisville right now. I'm just kind of curious, did you have the magic balm that you anointed on Carson Wentz today, that he was somehow able to practice after everybody ruled him out for week 3? Because it looks like Carson Wentz is going to be on the field this week against the Titans.
I saw the injury. The man injured 2 ankles on one play. Highly unusual injury. I'm glad that he can come back. There's been questions about this player's toughness. There's questions about the player's likability. There's questions about the player in a lot of ways. But, if he can step up for this, it really will be the proverbial feather in his cap, and the team will rally around him. And look, anyone that gets to play take their passing game against the Tennessee Titans, they don't want to miss that opportunity. 300 yards a game is the benchmark. It's sort of the floor for what a quarterback can expect in this contest.
The Colts-Titans game is going to get a lot of run on this program tonight. We are going to discuss that. Plus, we're going to discuss everything you need to know about the Christian McCaffrey injury, how this affects Chuba Hubbard, and Jalen Hurts. Should he be in your lineup this week over Tom Brady? Oh, yeah, we're going to get into that. And then Jason Tavares, who managed his team all the way up to 4th place in the FFPC main event after week 1, is going to join us to discuss Daniel Jones' startability for week 3, the Ravens running backs not named Tyson Williams, and, of course, much, much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. We have a good group of great guys who like the HSFF Hour in there right now. You can post your questions. You might have right in there. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, you can do so at HSFF Hour. I'm at Eric Balkman. And, of course, you can check out the KFFSC, not only at KFFSC, but KFFSC.com. Our Facebook page is at facebook.com/HSFF Hour. And if you want to chime in and talk with us, you can do that at 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVA. You can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for tonight's guest, Jason Tavares, for myself, or Farrell, send them in now. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, tweets, and emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend, Bryce, and, of course, our producer and mutual friend, Rob. Fantasy Flash, let's kick things off. Where else but San Francisco, as it has been the talk of high-stakes fantasy football nation over the last couple of weeks. According to John Lynch, Elijah Mitchell, who has the shoulder injury, is, quote, very questionable for Week 3. Cam Inman on Twitter put this out there. And if we look further into this on the official injury report that the San Francisco 49ers released late this afternoon, Elijah Mitchell is officially listed as doubtful. Now, you look at the 49ers situation, no JaMychal Hasty, we know he's out. No Raheem Mostert, we know he's out. Trey Sermon actually cleared the league's concussion protocol and will be available to play. Now, there is a situation here where the Niners have signed Jacques Patrick from Florida State University, who apparently is close to John Riggins, as far as John Lynch says this week. And it was a bit of a joke where he compared Jacques Patrick's to John Riggins. But Trey Sermon, Farrell, if he is active, I mean, you're looking at Trenton Cannon, Patrick, obviously, some of the other guys we mentioned. It could be the Trey Sermon show Sunday night, but the problem with this, it's Sunday night. So you are going to have to wait until after the late games have already been played to figure out what you're doing with Trey Sermon. How do you handle this situation for high-stakes fantasy football when you have to wait until the final 2 games of the week whether or not to start Trey Sermon or not against, quite frankly, a very questionable Packers rush defense?
Oh, please try to have someone else lined up so you don't do this to yourself and have the agony from now through the weekend. Pickings are very, very lean in free agency. And if you've spent for other available running backs, you've exhausted funds. And, I think about the 4 teams, and I saw some line up this way, Balky, as you went down through the number 1 pick, McCaffrey, and I saw Sermon around the 6th, 7th round for a lot of these teams in that number 1 picks column. So, you need to also understand who Jacques Patrick is. I think there's a player that is an example of 2 things, the depth in the NFL at the position and the failure of the NFL scouting departments. But because I think he's a very fine player, he proved it in the XFL in that he dominated that league. Didn't necessarily be a top running back, but would be a separate running back. And I've been waiting for this guy to get his opportunity. Cam Akers stole thunder in his senior year. He entered the league as a free agent. He's in a situation where I thought Cincinnati should have played him some last year, and they were playing Gio Bernard when Mixon was injured. This is a very good player. So if you start Sermon, don't be surprised to see Patrick, who will be active for the game, come in and play. He's not a practice squad player because when you sign off another team's practice squad, you are, in fact, active for at least 3 games.
A guy who is active but has not been playing a ton as far as snaps go the first 2 weeks of the season has been Randall Cobb, and according to Madison.com, Matt LaFleur, the head coach of the Packers, says he wants Randall Cobb to be more involved in the team's offense. Officially, Randall Cobb has played 22% of the Packers snaps through the first 2 weeks of the season. In fact, Monday night against Detroit, he only played 12 snaps. He got 3 targets that game. He caught all of them for 26 yards. And Aaron Rodgers, who a lot of people would say was the catalyst for Randall Cobb coming back to Green Bay, says that he'd like more playing time for Randall Cobb, who he is very good friends with. The other rookie slot receiver that was expected to take a lot of the snaps for the Packers this year, Amari Rodgers out of Clemson, he played 15 snaps week 1. He got 0 offensive snaps in week 2. It's been Allen Lazard who has been playing in the slot for the Packers over the course of the last 2 weeks as far as dominance level goes. You look at a tough Niners game this weekend, Farrell. I willingly admit that I may have been wrong on Randall Cobb. I drafted him all over the place in the KFFSC. I drafted him in a ton of other spots. I may have been wrong about him. And I cut him in like maybe one or two leagues for, I think, like Cordero Patterson and KJ Osborne this past week. But for your sake, what are you doing with Randall Cobb this week? Is he worth keeping around? Do you think that he takes a step forward and has a startable week 3?
I don't think so as a startable week 3. We know Randall Cobb is going to be better as the season moves on. And as you get into bye weeks that will start soon and then we'll run through week 14, as you look around slot receiver players who are being productive either in the absence or non-performance of injured or young players that have yet to get their chance, you can do a lot worse than Randall Cobb. So, yes, the quarterback starts clicking like he clicked on Monday night. He's going to have his say as to which players are available to him to move the ball to. And when Cobb's on the field, he looks for Cobb. So, yeah, Bucky, you've upgraded your rosters by releasing Randall Cobb for some of the players you've mentioned. But I wouldn't make a wholesale release of Randall Cobb because he'll end up starting for you sometimes this year, and you'll be proud that you drafted him.
Yeah, I tried to hang on to him wherever I could for sure, and I guess I still, in my heart of hearts, believe that Cobb is going to be a top 36, a top 48 receiver certain weeks this season, and quite frankly, maybe more often than not. So if you can, with injuries and the bye weeks rearing their ugly head within the next few weeks, see if you can hang on to Cobb. I'm with Farrell. I think you can. I think you'll be happy you did. Speaking of receivers here, Odell Beckham, apparently, according to ESPN's Dan Graziano, is going to play against Week 3, quote, barring an unforeseen setback between now and game time. This will be his first game of the 2021 season. The first 2 games, he was held out by the Cleveland Browns. Remember, he tore his ACL last year, and this was essentially sort of the completion of his rehab from that ligament tear. You don't know if he is going to have the full complement of snaps that he normally is accustomed to when he is out there fully healthy. You don't know if they're going to manage those reps at all. And quite frankly, there could be some sussing of the Odell Beckham usage in Week 3, but Cleveland doesn't necessarily have a huge luxury here with Jarvis Landry on injured reserve. So it could be a Boffo Week 3 for Odell Beckham. Now, you look at what you can get out of him, again, Farrell, and I bring this up too, not a ton of injuries right now. Nobody's on bye. Are you better off keeping Odell Beckham on your bench if you can afford it for one more week until he gets his feet wet, until he gets conditioned, until he's ready to get his normal snap load in Week 4 coming up this season, Farrell?
I never considered drafting this player this year, and that's one bullet that I've dodged. And I know that some players will get Beckham on the field this year and will benefit from it because he's going to have a game or two. But it's too few and far between and too difficult to predict. Yes, he's got a significant role if he's going to be on the field, but I would rather avoid all the issues attached to this. So if he's on your roster, you likely paid a 6th-round draft pick for him. And if you win heavy wide receiver, there are wide receivers that are stepping up and producing from the double-digit rounds. I would probably stick with them until I see it from Beckham. But you might be in a situation, especially if you're a little running back tight end heavy in the FFPC, that your draft capital now has to be spent and you have to get Beckham on the field. And, hold your breath in that situation.
Yeah, hold your breath indeed. And I think, again, like Farrell said, if you can find somebody else that's close, go with him at least for this 1 week. And I don't think you'll be missing out. You'll still be able to reap the rewards of Odell Beckham with no Jarvis Landry for the next couple of weeks after this one. All right, let's get to the center of the fantasy football universe here as far as what happened last night in the Texans-Panthers game. Chuba Hubbard gets 11 carries for 52 yards in the win over the Texans. He also caught 3 passes for 27 yards. 18 minutes into this game, we saw that Christian McCaffrey strained his hamstring, and so Royce Freeman and Chuba Hubbard occupied the backfield for the remainder of the ball game for the Carolina Panthers. Now, Hubbard did not get necessarily the lion's share of carries, but certainly you can make the case that he was the guy after McCaffrey went down. He did drop a touchdown. He got stood up on 4th and 5 from the Texans' 5-yard line. That could have been a touchdown there as well. That was all in the first half. In the second half, he looked much, much better. Several 10-plus yard gains helped the clock moving, helped the chains running in this case, and it seems like he is going to be the guy to start going forward for the Carolina Panthers while Christian McCaffrey is out. So, Farrell, not much to say about Christian McCaffrey here. It sounds like he is going to be out multiple games. I don't know if it was a grade 1 or grade 2 strain, which obviously influences how long he's going to be out. But if you have Chuba Hubbard on your squad, if you are thinking about starting him, obviously not in week 3, but week 4 going forward, how comfortable do you feel about that? What kind of faith do you have in the rookie out of Oklahoma State?
Oh, yeah, he's in my lineup if I have him. And it was on cue last night that our announcers, Buck and Aikman, pretty much exhausted everything they had in regards to Hubbard. You could see that there was some lack of preparation. I think any fantasy manager could have handled explaining to the listening public just who this player was. And at one point they said that without McCaffrey, Carolina has no running game, and I think that's when Hubbard immediately churned out about 10 yards. I really like the way he ran. No one's going to replace McCaffrey, but this kid in this offense is going to have to step up and deliver. And, I think we always had a sense that he would get some chance this year in some way to relieve Christian McCaffrey. I didn't think it would come this early in this kind of serious injury. But drafters are going to be rewarded. You drafted this guy in case of this situation, or you were able to grab this player before the team drafting in the number 1 position did. Good for you. You should put him in your lineup and play him. I think we saw where the quarterback, to me, is still very challenged here at Arnold, and it's going to be dependent on a short passing game and a running back that can move the sticks. Hubbard fits that bill. Freeman will fill in nicely around him. Go ahead and get this player in your lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I did not get Chuba Hubbard in a ton of spots. In fact, the one league I have McCaffrey in, I did not back him up with Hubbard, but I do have Hubbard in a couple other places, so we'll see what happens there as far as the flex position goes. It's interesting because we know that Christian McCaffrey is out multiple weeks, yet the Carolina Panthers have not placed him on injured reserve, which would knock him out a minimum of 3 games. So potentially, if we, connect the dots here, you would think that Christian McCaffrey maybe only misses week 4 and week 5 and is back for week 6. That remains to be seen with that hamstring strain, and certainly the Panthers don't want to rush him back too soon because he could be missing more time after that as a possibility. I think I saw it was like a 20% or maybe a 25% risk of re-injury if he comes back too soon. We will be watching that going forward, and let's get into tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen. I want to bring him in right now and talk not necessarily about his chances for maybe dipping out 25% into the season, but whether he will be in it for the long haul here and try to win that $500,000 grand prize in the FFPC main event. He has been playing fantasy football since he was a wee lad back in 6th grade. He already has 4 league titles, not only FFPC, but the Footballguys Players Championship as well. He sits in the top 30 in the 2021 FFPC main event after navigating his squad all the way up to 4th place after week 1. I want to bring in onto the program Mr. Jason Tavares. Jason, thank you so much for joining Farrell and I this evening, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on the show.
We will talk fantasy football with you. We're doing very good. We're excited. We're on the cusp of week 3, which is always good that we're in the thick of it. In fact, this will be our last show in September. The next time we do this, we will be in October, and we will really be in the thick of fantasy football. We're going to be in the thick of fantasy football here in our interview shortly, Jason. But before we get into that, can you tell us what you're doing for a living when you are not living in the top 30 of the FFPC main event?
For a living, I'm actually a carpenter. I work in New York City, and that's pretty much it. When I'm not working, I'm watching anything that has to do with sports.
That's a pretty nice gig to have, just because I would think that you have all the work to keep you busy that you want. Is that what's going on in your world right now?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It really depends, honestly. During the pandemic, it actually was kind of bad. All the construction stuff wasn't happening.
Well, I got to tell you, you share a little bit of that with one Pittsburgh Steelers rookie running back, because I think he's going to have all the work that he can possibly handle in carrying a big load with this team. I was very happy to draft him wherever I could get my hands on him, and I think we are. I think we're leaning towards a good result and a better result after watching him in week 2. What's your thoughts about Najee Harris? What do you need him to do to propel your teams to keep this lofty record that you have so far?
I think he's got to get some more yards per carry here. I mean, he's running behind a bad line. The only good thing is, like you're saying, he is the workhorse there. That's why I wanted to draft him too, because there is nobody behind him. They're going to just keep giving him the ball. So whether he gets 3 yards to carry, 4 or 5, he's just going to keep getting him the ball. So if you get a touchdown, you're good, right?
Yes, sir.
But I do think he's just going to keep getting the ball. So regardless, he'll team running back, I think.
And that's the thing, and we're talking about this in the chat room right now too with Wasp guy Hudson Turn-Reeve, that he needs, Harris needs a better offensive line in Pittsburgh. But the way I looked at it was this, and I can't remember who brought this up to me first, but I have Najee Harris in a couple of leagues. And the way I looked at it was this: I did not draft him based on him being part of this massively elite offense. I did not draft him based on the fact that he is going to be playing behind one of the top quarterbacks in football. I did not draft him based on him running behind a top 5 offensive line. I drafted him based on the fact that he will be getting a ton of volume, both with carries and with catches. So for me, I didn't necessarily care too much about how poor his offensive line was, because I thought the volume would rinse that out in the aggregate and he would still finish as a very good offense or a very good running back this year. And I'm still holding out hope that that's what we see. Certainly you cannot bench him at this point. You've got to roll him out there. Better days are ahead for Najee Harris. Now, a player I'm not so sure better days are ahead on is Marquez Callaway. This is a guy that you took, Jason, in the 7th round of your FFPC main event.
Yeah.
I spent a mint. I could have retired on the amount of blind biddings bucks I spent on Marquez Callaway in the preseason. I'm looking for a refund on that. I know I'm not going to get it, but it's been frustrating. First 2 weeks have not been good for Marquez Callaway. So my question to you is, how likely is it that Callaway does turn it around and becomes the player that we thought he was going to be after what we saw in the preseason?
I'm kind of starting to lose hope, especially with that. Even the first game, like, the offense was still bad. The second game, I felt like it was even worse. And if they wind up changing quarterbacks, I think it's going to get even worse for him. I'm still holding hope only because of that. I drafted him in the 7th round, and a bunch of other teams I drafted him. So it's almost like, being stubborn with it, right? Like you said, you drafted him too, so it's kind of like you're hoping, you're wishing that he comes through, but I'm not seeing it. I'm really not. I'm not going to drop him just because I got him in the 7th round. I felt I liked him enough where I reached a little bit, I think, for him. But maybe Michael Thomas coming back later in the season, maybe that'll open it up for him a little bit. That's the only thing I could think of. But I'm not liking it.
Guys, he can get separation, and when he does, he'll demand the ball. And I the first game was weird because it was too easy for the Saints, and there was short yardage situations. Field for Wentz is on a half field, and many times because of inefficiency. And then, if you could think of a quarterback, if you're told that your whole coaching staff is going to miss the game because of COVID, think of any quarterback that would affect the most. It would most likely be Jameis Winston. So
I agree.
It's a very strange 2-week sampling for Cal. and I'm joining you guys. He's not up this week. I'm not giving up hope. I think we'll be. I think before the season's over, we're going to find some utility out of that 7th round draft pick. I say with my fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he looked good in the preseason. The talent's there. It's just as soon as that regular season started, he's disappointing a lot of people, not just us.
Well, another area of disappointment. Now, you take the two teams in the National Football League that are designed to rush the ball, that are absolutely no bones about it. These are running teams that are built around the rush. They have other talented players in receiver positions, but they are a complement to the rushing game. And both of their backs obliterated. We've already talked about San Francisco. Even worse as to what has happened with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I congratulate, we're talking about waiver ups and of course, depending on when you were drafted, whether you drafted this player or got him on the waiver wire, independent you got him on your team, if you did get him, you have to be very, very happy about Tyson Williams. Can you talk to me about Latavius Murray and some of the other well-recognized names that the front office in Baltimore has added to the roster? Do you see any value in that going forward?
I feel like Baltimore at this point is just trying to sign anybody. So but right. I think Tyson does look good. And that, what did he get, like 2 carries last game? Devontae Freeman actually had some pop in that game. And, I mean, if he plays it was only 2 carries. I don't see anything from Latavius Murray. He's really shown nothing. They should give more carries to Tyson, but, they like that committee. Even when Dobbins is there, they're giving it to Dobbins and to Gus Edwards. So they're continuing to do the same thing. But I kind of do like Devontae Freeman. Maybe have a little bit of resurgence here. Maybe take over as the second back, probably. But I do like Tyson there.
This is
I
so
don't like
great
Le'Veon Bell. I could say that.
No, you and I are of one mind on that one for sure, Jason. And this is great for me as a Florida State fan because here we are, September in the year of 2021. Our Lord, we are talking about Jacques Patrick and Devontae Freeman on the same program.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Florida State running backs, baby. Gotta love it. It's going to maybe not necessarily set the world on fire, but it's going to set the fantasy football talking world on fire as we continue our exploration through former Seminoles running backs here on the program tonight.
Well,
let's go to a question. Go ahead.
Then you can talk about Dalvin Cook then if you want to talk about Florida State's running back.
Yes. This is a good question. So let's talk about Dalvin Cook here very briefly here, Jason. He did not practice all week, yet the Vikings list him as questionable. He's basically a game-time decision. How nervous are you about starting Dalvin Cook this week, given the fact that, I was talking to a couple of guys at work today about Dalvin Cook, and I'm like, I cannot remember the last time a run. I've seen DeAndre Hopkins do it, where he doesn't practice all week and he still plays on Sunday. But when's the last time you saw a running back not practice all 3 days, was still out there Sunday? And by the way, this is a late game on Sunday, so you might have some decisions to make here. Is Dalvin Cook worth waiting for at 4:25 Eastern time against the Seahawks?
That's tough. That he's such a special talent that you're kind of like, you kind of don't, because then if he plays, then you're going to be kicking yourself in the ass that he got you 25 points, as a late scratch. But I feel like Dalvin Cook is always nicked up. He's always got something. He's always questionable. I'd probably still keep him in my lineup. I would probably still keep him in. Unless something drastic happens, I'd probably still keep him in there. Unless I have somebody that's much better that you take the chance with it. It doesn't matter. But if you don't have the depth there, I'd probably still keep him in.
Me too,
I will
brother.
bring this up. I will bring this up as the former co-host of the show, who's actually in the chat room right now. Dave the Dizzle Gerzak, said, a lot of times, even with these Sunday night and late Sunday afternoon games, you'll get word, you'll have a good feeling before 1 o'clock Eastern on Sunday before you set your lineups. You'll have a good feeling one way or the other whether Dalvin Cook is going to play or not. So keep paying attention to that for sure. I do want to bring up one other thing from the chat room here. Kern Reeve, our boy, wants to know, Jason, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire a disappointment this season, or do you think he's going to emerge later on? How do you feel about Clyde Edwards-Helaire? When we look back at the 2021 season, will we be labeling Edwards-Helaire as a guy who lived up to his draft capital, or is he going to be a guy who's letting people down?
There's still, we only played 2 weeks into the season, right? He hasn't done anything. He's still in that high-powered offense. You're kind of hoping, all right, maybe they're not going to run the ball out there, but you're kind of hoping he's still going to get those catches, and 2 weeks go by and he's still not getting anything there, right? I still don't think he's going to be a disappointment, but he was getting drafted in the late second round. He might not hold that value for that late second round pick. I'm holding out on that, but it's tough. He's not really showing anything, and the rest of the guys on the team are showing out, right? So I still think he's a big part of the offense. So I don't know if I were drafting today, I'm sure you probably would agree, he wouldn't go in the second round, not the way he's playing. That's for sure.
And I'm with you. I'm kind of holding out hope, but I'm cautiously pessimistic, I guess would be the way to frame this, is because because he's got, when you draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire that high, there is a lot to live up to at this point. Right. So I'm sort of on the pessimistic side of optimism right now, but he could easily change my mind. It's only been 2 weeks. We're talking with Jason Tavares, the guy who managed his team all the way up to fourth place in the FFPC main event after 1 week of play. We've talked about I think we touched on the Vikings here. And what's interesting is that's going on in Minnesota. You have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, two of the highest drafted, maybe the highest drafted tandem receivers out there outside of Seattle, maybe with Metcalf and Lockett. But
or the Cowboys.
KJ Osborne. Or the Cowboys, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. I know you're a big Cowboys guy for sure, so you understand how that goes as well. But when you look at specifically the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll get into the Cowboys here in a little bit, KJ Osborne has been doing great when you consider, not only when you consider, the other receivers in that offense, but just the fact that this guy wasn't drafted anywhere. He's already got 15 targets on the season. He's transformed that into 12 yards, 12 catches, 167 yards, and he's gotten into the end zone as well. So, Jason, when you look at the Vikings, how long do you think KJ Osborne can keep this level of production up?
I think he might. I think he's benefiting from Irv Smith being injured. They're running a lot of three receiver sets, and he's just taking all those targets, right? Everybody was kind of hoping that Irv Smith this year would have a big year. Unfortunately, he gets injured, but KJ Osborne is benefiting from that now, and I think he's going to probably keep it up the whole year now. He might be one of those winning waiver wire pickups. I don't see they're gonna. I feel like they're going to be throwing it a lot. Obviously they have Dalvin, but I don't see the Vikings being a very good team, and they're probably going to have to play from behind. So they're going to be throwing it a lot. I don't see him slowing down too much with that. He's not going to put up numbers that Thielen and Jefferson are going to be putting up, but I think he's going to be all right.
I'm with you there, Jason. I got to tell you, Balky and I have been talking about it. Some of the players that I love, what's called around the league is guys that can play with contact balance, and you don't see that in a lot of receivers. I went back to try to figure out what I didn't know about this player when he came out. I looked at his combine numbers. He popped 8 on the bench press at the combine. He ran well. He did a lot of good things, and he spent last year in Minnesota basically in hiding on their reserve roster. But this is a player that when he played Cincinnati, and it's the one thing you can see, if a player gets hit and he still keeps running, he still stays in bounds, he still keeps his balance, what else could you want out of a strong slot receiver. He's I thought initially that he's built like Laviska Shenault. He's not that big. He's like 205, but he plays a little bit like Shenault, and that's a compliment. Right. I want to go. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Indianapolis at Tennessee, and I think I saw something last night that I'm going to give you a forerunner as to what I believe in this question. But is there anyone in that Colts lineup that you would bench just based on what you've heard about Carson Wentz? We may get Wentz. We think we will. We may get Eason, particularly if we were to focus on the receiving core. How would you feel about going forward with Pittman there? Based on the health of those players.
You know, I was actually going back and forth with that because I have Pittman on a bunch of teams, and honestly, I'm basing my decision almost on what I saw last night with the Texans, right? Because you have Brandon Cooks there, right? Kind of same situation, and I was going back and forth with benching him, but you got to throw it to somebody, and I figured they were going to be behind in that game, so you're going to throw it to someone, and you know, he did what he had to do. I feel like the same thing might happen in that Colts game. So I don't bench Pittman. I don't think I would bench him just because they got to give it to someone. And he's the most talented guy on that team of the receivers. So you got to give it to somebody. And they're probably going to be behind too. So I'm starting him. And I'm probably starting him with confidence. I'm probably not going to get the same, obviously, that you would get from Wentz. Quarterback is not as talented, but I keep Pittman in my lineup.
Yeah, and I think you saw the same thing last night when you considered the quarterback Darnold. Darnold was troubled last night, and he continued to go to one receiver, DJ Moore.
Right.
Both Moore and Cooks had great games, so I think you're onto something there, and I think you've unlocked that. And I think I'll make the same move too.
Hey, Jason, as long as we're talking about Pittman right here, we're going to bring this up later in the show. I think we might as well bring it up now. We had an emailer contact us this week when it looked like Carson Wentz was going to be held out. It's John in Phoenix, and he writes, both of them were huge in week 2, but I only have room in my lineup for one of them in week 3. You make the call. Rondale Moore or Michael Pittman? Thanks so much, fellas. John in Phoenix, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for emailing. So this is a good one right here when you look at two guys that sort of, didn't wow anybody in week 1, but both were awesome in week 2. Now you look at what they're doing in week 3. We already mentioned Michael Pittman is taking on the Titans in Nashville. Rondale Moore this week is going to be on the road as well, but he's in Jacksonville taking on that hapless Jags defense. So if you can only fit one in your lineup here, Jason, do you bench Pittman or do you bench Rondale Moore?
I probably still bench Rondale Moore. Only Pittman more, and I feel like last week when he had like 113 yards, 77 was from that broken play that Kyler Murray scrambled and hit him with a pass. So I'm still going with Pittman on that. That's just
Farrell,
my take.
How do you fall in on that? Pittman versus Moore in week 3.
I think, guys, that you're going to see a lot of Rondale Moore on broken plays being successful this year. But I go with you, Jason, because we expect Arizona to win that game, and Arizona's got a lot of tools and a lot of different things that they can try to establish. For Indianapolis to win, they're going to have a big game through Pittman. So I think you're lining them up correctly, my friend.
Yeah, I agree. I think Arizona should handle that game pretty easy.
I'm with both you guys on this. Jason, you make the point, too. Like, the game script doesn't really sound like Rondale Moore is going to be heavily involved. You look at his production last week. It was basically, the majority of it was based on a broken play. You still have A.J. Green there. It sounds like DeAndre Hopkins is still going to be out there. Don't forget about Christian Kirk, who had the big week 1. Who else is there in Indy? Not a ton. And you might be able to get it done against Tennessee this week with Pittman getting a lot of targets. So I think you go with volume, you go with Pittman, You sit Rondale Moore. That is your answer, John in Phoenix. Let's move on here as we are talking with the Week 1 fourth-place team in the FFPC main event, a 4-time champion in the FFPC and the Football Guys Players Championship, Jason Tavares. We talked a little bit earlier about the Vikings. Let's talk about a former Viking here in Cordero Patterson. What are the chances, Jason, after what we saw in Week 2, he leapfrogs Mike Davis and becomes not only the starting running back in Atlanta, but becomes a 3-down running back there as well, because he certainly has got the chops on the passing downs. What are the chances he gets it done on all 3 downs for the Falcons this year?
Well, what was the knock on Mike Davis? He started to break down towards the end of the year, right? Last year, Cordell Patterson is a better receiver out of the backfield. I think he is going to leapfrog him. I would say, I don't know, maybe by the middle of the year. Mike Davis doesn't look good. He's not playing that much better than Patterson, where we kind of have to be like, all right, we have to keep him in there. They're kind of at that same level. Patterson, to me, has the advantage because he's a better pass-catching back than him because he was a wide receiver. So I think he eventually does leapfrog him. Unless Mike Davis just, I don't know where just starts performing a lot better. But right now I'm going to say that he probably is going to leapfrog him.
Value on the waiver wire, brother. I got to ask you about something. There's some interesting matchups this week from the defensive side of things. There's some defenses. Last night we saw Carolina shut down the Texans, although I thought the Texans played very aggressively, played very hard football. Lots of shrewd drafters were taking Carolina, including my great friend Brad Cruz, who reminded me of that in a conversation earlier today. But I see the Raiders going off the board. You never see the Raiders defense being employed, and you see them being lined up as a streaming option this week against the second-string quarterback from the Dolphins. Buffalo, Buffalo and New England, if they weren't drafted, they're going for some fairly significant bids for a defense. How much on a week-to-week basis are you working and streaming your defensive and special teams squad to try to get you those few points advantage, which could be very important in that head-to-head as well as total points situation?
All right. Honestly, I don't do it as much. I actually like that method of doing that because, like you said, you can squeak out a little bit of points here or there every week with something, but it's also tough, right? Because, everybody wants to get if you have a good defense, you know what you're going to get pretty much every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to touch that, and that's it. You don't have to go into the waiver wire. I do like the streaming aspect, but me personally, most of my teams, I'll grab a fairly decent defense so I don't have to worry about it unless I see a terrible matchup for my defense and I see something that's really good, but besides that, like on FFPC, so I don't have to spend any of that fab money, I don't. But I do like that method of streaming defense. Just me personally, I don't do it really.
I will say this, as far as Kentucky goes, Farrell, the KFFSC, where defenses are very important into fantasy success there. I typically have rolled. I start the season off with one defense, and then as I see the season play out, I can kind of see who is going to be the important defenses off the waiver wire that I can acquire, and then keep 2 defenses on my roster for the remainder of the season. For instance, this past week, not a lot of people were on them because it's not the greatest of matchups in Week 3, but I think in a half dozen leagues, I got the Kansas City Chiefs defense, and I plan on deploying them on weeks where, the matchup is important. And the fact that they were still out there and I could get them cheap now, well, now I can pair them with whatever defense I drafted at the start of the season and play the matchups and hopefully exploit that advantage and take advantage of it for the remainder of the season. I don't have to play the Chiefs every week, and obviously it's going to get a little bit hairy when bye weeks set in. But if I can somehow manage that and keep those two defenses on my roster, the longer I can do that, the better off I am and the advantage I'm going to have at defense going forward. That's not only true in the KFFSC, it's true in the FFPC as well. Let's get to a couple of emails here, gentlemen, that we got from some listeners. We already got to John in Phoenix. Before we kick that off, another question in the chat room. It sounds like, it doesn't sound like Deontay Johnson got officially ruled out today for Pittsburgh. Wasp Guy in the chat room wants to know, Jason, is Deontay Johnson being out for Pittsburgh better for Juju Smith-Schuster, or is it better for Chase Claypool this week? The Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way, do take on in Week 3 the Cincinnati Bengals at home. So Johnson out. Is it better for Smith-Schuster, or is it better for Claypool, Jason?
I'm going to say Juju because now I feel like Juju's going to get those targets now. He's more of a, kind of like a Deontay type receiver, right? Chase Claypool, I mean, they're both going to get more targets, but I feel like, in the PPR aspect, I think that Juju is going to benefit off of this more, which I love because I have Juju in a bunch of leagues, so I'm okay with that. So I hope I'm right. But yeah, I think Juju is going to benefit more off of this.
Let's get into let's go to Ohio for our next question here. Akron specifically. It's Dale. He wants to know, hi Jason, tough lineup call for me this week in my Footballguys Players Championship League. Would you play Daniel Jones at quarterback or Ryan Tannehill? Now this is interesting because Daniel Jones was not drafted in a bunch of leagues. Ryan Tannehill was drafted basically as a top 12 option, in pretty much every league. I don't think anybody's drafted him so far. But you look at the matchups this week. Ryan Tannehill gets the Indianapolis Colts, and that's at home, by the way, in Tennessee. But then you look at Daniel Jones, who has been coming on the last couple of weeks. You look at Daniel Jones and his matchup this week. He gets to face off against the Atlanta Falcons. This game is in New York. So I think the matchup would certainly say, hey, it's Daniel Jones. The talent might say Ryan Tannehill. If you could only play one of these guys in a non-superflex, a quarterback one-only league like the FPC, who are you rolling with, Jones or Tannehill?
Eric, this is going to hurt me. I'll tell you this right now. It's going to really hurt me. Most of my friends are Giants fans, and they're listening to this show. But I'm going to have to say I'd go with Daniel Jones. And I don't want to say that. That hurts. But I'm going with Daniel Jones on this one. I know Tannehill has the talent, but, Daniel Jones is going to get those rushing yards. And, he is deceptively fast. I'll say that. I did not think he was that fast. I think he's going to have the better fantasy day. Atlanta is bad, but
it's escaped now from your mouth, Chase. You cannot take it back. It's been heard. It's been recorded.
I know.
It's going to live forever that you made this call. And I don't think it's a bad call. I might give you a caveat. I would say if Carson Wentz starts the game for Indianapolis, then I would go ahead and play Tannehill. But if Eason is the quarterback for Indianapolis, I would take a run with Daniel Jones, and we don't have to get into why. But, if there was ever a week to start Daniel Jones, this is it. If you're ever going to do it, this is it.
I don't think he's
am playing
quarterback.
Well, what's funny about that is I'm with you on that, Jason, but I picked him up in a couple of leagues this week, and I plan on playing him. But outside of Week 3, man, I have no Daniel Jones plans going forward. Yeah. None. Zero.
I agree.
Zilch, nada. Jason, I did the same thing here. So,
yep.
So, yes, exactly. So when you are surrounded by Giants fans in New York Giants country there in the northeastern part of the country, how did you become such a big Cowboys fan?
Oh. Well, actually, I became a Cowboys fan when I was about 6, and it had nothing to do with football. I was a little wee lad, as you said, and I had a crush on a girl that liked the Cowboys, and that's how it all started.
That's great.
Wow.
That's great.
That had nothing to do with football.
Well, listen, we do, and you're married to her now, and you have 15 kids with her, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Well,
she's about 5 years older than me at that time.
I gotcha. Yeah. So just if we do a quick interlude on the Cowboys this year, listen, everybody who was on them last year was reaping the benefits of it until Dak Prescott went down. They look like they are, loaded for bear again this year, at least offensively speaking. Did you load up in your drafts this year? Did you load up on the CeeDee Lambs, the Amari Coopers, Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescotts of the world?
I did wherever I could get them, depending on where they fell to me in the draft. Yeah, I didn't try to reach too much, but yeah, I honestly I had if I could get CeeDee Lamb, I'd draft CeeDee Lamb. I was higher on CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper than I was on drafting Zeke, to be honest with you. I do have Zeke on a couple teams, but I wasn't. It was kind of just like, all right, he fell to me there. You kind of have to draft him, kind of thing. But I wasn't as high. Dak also, I'm not big on, I guess, grabbing quarterbacks too early. But if it was there like for value, then I would get it. But I like more CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper.
Well, if you're going to keep that girl, you better reach for those Cowboys. That's all I'm going to advise. Eric, is it time for me to ask my weekly question, my question that I live to ask?
Give me one more minute because Nick in Scranton, Pennsylvania, I don't know if he's an Office fan or not. He has one email, and then we'll get to you, Farrell. Yes, exactly. One final email here. He writes, he didn't get much action in week 1, but week 2 is a different story. Do you expect Cortland Sutton to continue his tear now with Jerry Jeudy out for a couple of months? Nick, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for the email. We appreciate it. So, Jason, Cortland Sutton was awesome in week 2. Is this what we can expect from him until Jerry Jeudy comes back?
I do. It's funny you say that. A friend of mine asked me last week, should he start him? And I said, put him in with confidence. I think he's no Jeudy there. They got to give it to somebody, right? He's definitely the most talented wide receiver there. You got to give it to him. So I do
Farrell,
think he's going to.
Beautiful advice. We've been through a lot of players, and you may have to. The second part of my question, you may have to dig deep because we've thrown a lot of names out here. But I need 2 names. I need the name that everybody is going to regret drafting. They don't necessarily have to be off to a bad start. They could be off to a good start, but a guy that you didn't believe in that went early, first round, middle of the second, something like that. And then I need your sleeper pick, your guy that you could put in a lineup and really, really create some numbers with this weekend. Can you find me 2 guys?
Just for this weekend?
Just for this. Well, no. You can go ahead. Deep into the future.
Well, I'll go. The one guy that I think is going to disappoint this year, this is why I wasn't that high on him. And again, this is going to hurt me to say this, Zeke. I think Pollard has been too good when he's on the field that, and Zeke hasn't been producing, definitely not at that first-round talent, and I don't think you can keep Pollard off the field, really. Like, you're going to have to put him in there in some capacity, right? And he's going to be taken away from Zeke. And so unless he starts breaking some big runs or doing something, I think he's going to be a disappointment. Him and also one other guy that I didn't like is Saquon. I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen this year. And some people drafted him in the first round. Some people, when they got the news that he was healing up and he was ahead of recovery time and all that, I just don't think he's going to produce at that level. I think he's going to be a bust this year, my opinion. And for this week, there's 2 guys that I like. I don't want to say sleeper, but I like Marvin Jones against the Cardinals.
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to be playing from behind. Their secondary isn't great. And, Trevor Lawrence keeps going to him. I actually really like Marvin Jones this week.
I like it. It makes sense. Marvin Jones is a guy that I actually drafted late in a lot of leagues this year, and I've been pretty happy and pretty satisfied.
Yep.
Not only with my amazing drafting capabilities to get a guy like that late, but a guy that has been coming through for sure. And flexible every single week thus far, and maybe more going forward. We will see what happens with Marvin Jones. A guy that is more than flexible on this show, a guy that is in contention for a $500,000 grand prize in the FFPC main event is Jason Tavares. Jason, I want to thank you for hopping on the show tonight. Congratulate you on your success already this season. Wish you good luck in all of your leagues, not just the league that, or the team that you have in the top 30 in the FFPC main event. It has been a pleasure. Best wishes to you. Hopefully we'll talk again soon. Enjoy week 3, my man.
Hey, can I say one thing?
Go ahead.
I just want my friends that listen in, thanks for listening in, and forget that I said that thing about the Daniel Jones. Thanks.
No, never. No, never.
This is great because now they don't know. Well, they listen to the show like, well, Jason said he liked Daniel Jones. They say he didn't like that. I don't know what to believe about week 3 with Daniel Jones now. So you've officially confused your friends, yet still helped our listeners at the same time, which is all we ever want to do on the airwaves, Jason. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, dude. Good luck this week and going forward, man.
Great job. Thank you,
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Jason Tavares, ladies and gentlemen, the week 1 4th place team in the FFPC main event, slipped a little bit this week, but he is still in 28th overall. We will be following his team as the season goes on. Only a few minutes left here in the show, Farrell. Got a few more start-sit questions. We already helped out John in Phoenix. Let's go to Rolling Meadows, Illinois. This is a tight end question from Chris. He wants to know, would you start Jared Cook in the Arrowhead shootout or Robert Tonyan against the Niners? Yeah, the Chargers. In fact, I'm going to look up what the total is on that game. It's got to be high for that Chargers-Chiefs game going on Sunday with Jared Cook as the featured tight end, the tight end du jour. I mean, I guess there's you still got Donald Parham there as well, but Jared Cook looking pretty good there. Total at 54.5 with the Chiefs as a 7-point favorite. We look at the Niners and the Packers on Sunday Night Football. 50.5 is the total there with the Niners only a 3-point favorite. Farrell, if you could only play one of them, who would you go with, Jared Cook or Bobby Tonyan?
Oh, I think this is an easy one. You're going to go with Jared Cook here. Balky, you picked up the Kansas City Chiefs defense, and, only you and Lamar Jackson cannot see that defense is wide open down the middle, and where what Andrews didn't get against the Chiefs, Cook will get against the Chiefs. And, there was a problem last week. The young quarterback showed what we didn't see from him last year in Herbert. He threw for 300-plus yards, was very active between the 20s, had big problems in the red zone. Cook only caught 3 passes last week. The way to fix those red zone issues is to get the ball in the hands of a tight end, and that's going to be a featured aspect, I would expect, of the offensive scheme from the Chargers this week.
I'm with you on this one. I actually have Jared Cook in a few leagues. I'm rolling him out, and I have significant expectations for him. I would for sure be starting him over Robert Tonyan. And as everybody knows, I'm a Packers fan, and I'm still saying Jared Cook. Joe in Norcross, Georgia writes, Dear Balky and Farrell, I think Tom Brady is on pace for 70-plus touchdowns this season, but I'm still considering playing Jalen Hurts this week over him. What would the HSFF hour do? Have a great week 3. That is Joe in Norcross, Georgia. This is an interesting situation when you bring matchups into play, Farrell, because Tampa goes on the road to Los Angeles to take on the undefeated Rams. Now they are a 1-point favorite. It's a total of 55.5 there. So you got to love Tom Brady. But you look at Jalen Hurts on Monday Night Football against that Cowboys defense. That game, the Eagles are 3-point dogs, a total of 51.5. Farrell, I'm a weak man. I cannot play Hurts over Brady this week, although it's close. Would you be able to play Hurts over Brady in week 3?
I can't either. I would look closer at it if the game was in Philadelphia, perhaps. that might make me think longer about it. But you know what? I was conscious during the Super Bowl last year, and I saw what Brady can do to an excellent team wherever the game is played. And you know what? I'm not going to bench Tom Brady. I drafted him for a reason. And, if you've got Brady and Hurts at quarterback, you've got too much. And but congratulations for doing it. But no, I'm going to stick with Tom Brady, and I'm going to be very, very comfortable in that. And I will say something. I think this Dallas defense is much better than it was last year.
I'm with you, obviously. I'm playing Brady over Hurts. Congratulations on getting both those guys in your team, but you got to play Brady this week. Final email we have tonight, Farrell, is from Phil in Concord, California. He writes, "Good evening, gentlemen. If Josh Jacobs misses this week, would you roll with Kenyon Drake as a flex? My only other decent option is Melvin Gordon." Phil in Concord, California, thank you so much for listening and writing in your email. We certainly appreciate it. All right, so as we look over to Farrell's Las Vegas Raiders and in Josh Jacobs, I don't believe he practiced today, and he's officially listed as doubtful against the Dolphins this week. So it seems like it's going to be Peyton Barber and Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake, obviously, the pass catcher between the two. Farrell, assuming Jacobs is out, would you play Drake over Melvin Gordon, or are you still starting the Wisconsin Badger over the Drake?
The Drake is the guy for me. And still waters run deep, Balky. This situation is a revenge game for Drake. He played well for the Dolphins. They turned their back on him. This is an interesting matchup for him. I think Drake gets more of the rushing game. It continues to be a factor in the passing game. Peyton Barber was satisfactory in his role. But I think against this team, Drake's style of slash sort of cutback running style should pay dividends. I really believe in Drake this weekend. Gordon is a good start, too, playing much better than people in the fantasy world gave him credit for him. And, shout out to Chase. Wasn't he great?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give a final, as we're overtime right now, I will say this. Just to confuse our listeners, for anybody who makes their start-sit decisions based on what Farrell and I say, I will go against Farrell, and I'll say play Melvin Gordon over Kenyon Drake, so you have a legitimate tie. You don't have a legitimate tiebreaker here. Melvin Gordon against the Jets. This guy has exceeded expectations, especially anybody who believed in Javonte Williams as the guy here early on. It's still been Gordon. Gordon's still putting up numbers, not otherworldly numbers, but he's still putting up numbers. I think he does it again this week, and I would play him over Kenyon Drake just because of the Peyton Barber factor kind of gumming up the works there. But if you are, and I will say this, if you are looking to oh my goodness, I always let Balky and Farrell break my lineup decisions. Now they disagree. I will say it's close enough for me where if you want to go with your gut and you want to go with Farrell, I don't think Drake over Gordon is the wrong call. It's just, if I was faced with it, I would probably start Gordon over Drake. That's my personal opinion.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, exactly. So pat yourself on the back. Week 3 should be good no matter what, hopefully. And we'll talk about it next week on the show with the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship Commissioner, Farrell Elliott. Farrell, safe travels all the way home. We will talk to you after this decision has been made by all these fantasy players. And after we find out the results of it, enjoy week 3, dude. We will talk to you again next Friday, my man.
Thank you, sir.
Farrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. You follow them on Twitter at KFFSC. Farrell is on Twitter at JFarrellElliott. And, of course, KFFSC.com is where to find out more information on that if you're thinking about jumping into it next year as well. That is going to do it for tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank Jason Tavares. I want to thank Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you for hanging out with us as your precursor to the weekend and your precursor to week 3 of the FFPC season this year as well. We will be back next Friday Week 1 main event overall leader and FFPC league champion Silas Dane will join us next week at 10/9 Central. Hope you can tune in for that. Your weekend officially starts
This has
now.
been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and heard around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
September 24th, 2021 is the 30th anniversary of an album that is the release of an album that is arguably the greatest grunge album of all time. And I didn't realize it was released on this date 30 years ago, but it was. And that is Nirvana's Nevermind. It is not their debut album. A lot of people think that it is. It is not. Bleach was actually their first album, but Nevermind came out 30 years ago today. Lithium, Smells Like Teen Spirit, all the hits off that one. And this was, prior to Heart Shaped Box as well. But you had such. I mean, this was. Bear in mind too. This was an album that was released. The Smashing Pumpkins were supposed to hit the scene, right? And they were going to release their album. I believe that was Siamese Dream, and they had to delay it because Nevermind came out and just floored everybody. Come As You Are, In Bloom, Polly, Drain You, Territorial Pissings. I mean, On a Plane, Something in the Way. So many good tracks on this album, and it came out 30 years ago today. Changed the face of grunge, changed the face of 1990s alternative rock, really alternative rock going forward. So I don't know if you're a fan, but if you are, I know I will be spending the remainder of the evening listening to Nevermind to celebrate 30 years ago today. Wow, are we all old that this album came out. Truly one of the greatest grunge albums, if not the greatest grunge album of all time. We will be back next week. Good luck in week 3. I hope the ball bounces your way, everybody. Talk to you later. Thanks for listening.